You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
Vino هناك لشوارزنيجر
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
And welcome to Soccer Today. Normally we start our show with what we put on our lineup called Open and Banter, which is just Kevin and I sort of chatting and having some fun. That's unless we have a guest, obviously. And normally we'd do that, but today I don't think it's entirely appropriate, considering our first topic is a fairly serious one. That, of course, is the bombings, I should say, that occurred to the Borussia Dortmund bus yesterday in the Champions League, which caused the postponement of that game and the injury of Marc Bartra.
Yeah, it's minor injuries. Yeah, it's he had surgery. It's like you said, broken arm and some metal shrapnel in his skin. So he got surgery. But Duane, I have to say, it's a tragedy. But we have to be thankful that it was just that and not more. We'll go into the details of what happened in a second. But Borussia Dortmund players realized after the fact that there were metal pins in headrests of benches in that bus. It's really lucky that only the one injured player came out of the situation.
No, precisely. And look, one injury is too many, obviously.
Yes, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. And look, we live in a world where this stuff happens. I think that our mind immediately goes to a certain place. And I think that obviously, and we should stress that there has not been any release or any confirmation of who was behind this. So we're not going to.
There's an arrest right now. There's somebody in custody, and it is Islam radicals that was arrested. There's still the trails and still the evidence to be put together. So we don't know so far. There's no, like you mentioned, nobody revindicated that attack. But it was 3 bombs on the road from the hotel to the stadium on the German road. The bus, the Borussia Dortmund, 3 small explosive engines detonated once the bus passed over, and it created that injury and that situation. There has been 1 arrest, and apparently the police is looking for another suspect. They're trying to gather the chain of events, trying to figure out what happens. We're not going to reserve judgment until we know the facts, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, quickly the exact statement. I'm reading from the Guardian's live blog, which was one of the better sources of information on this yesterday. They've since shut this down about 16 hours ago until more information comes in. But in terms of the claim of responsibility, 16 hours ago, which would have been at 22:37, which is 10:37 GMT, they claimed that the police said that there was a letter of responsibility that they found, but they are not going to release any information on that until they can confirm the authenticity of it, and they have not done that yet. So that's where we are here now. Look, this obviously has a football angle to it as well. It caused the postponement of the Champions League game. There's some positive stuff that came out of that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But in terms of
bed for away supporters.
Yeah, what is it called exactly?
Bed
the hashtag beds for away friend.
Yeah, and food for away fans, tables for away fans. But
yeah, so there you go. And we'll talk about that in a second. But in terms of the actual game itself, it will go off as the early game. So just in a couple of hours from now, I imagine it will be a somewhat reserved atmosphere in there, you would think. Although you never know. You saw the Monaco fans chanting Dortmund, yes. Dortmund, clap, clap, clap.
It's going to be a very friendly affair between the supporters, that's for sure. We saw last night in Dortmund as well, a gathering of fans to show their love for their team and to support the team in a hard time. And the city itself, it's an event. Fortunately, one injury, like we mentioned, but it's an event that has more shock because of what could have been. It's that shock factor, shock value, and people are fighting against it by gathering together last night in the street of German.
Yeah, no, precisely. And that's the one thing I always say when I see these incidents take place, and they're terrible, obviously. And this one, you're right. This is lucky. This one didn't really do much. I don't want to dismiss the injury because it's affecting someone's career, and it's taking a starting player out of Dortmund's lineup, and there is an impact to this injury for sure. But in terms of life, there was none lost, and that's what we're focusing on here. But what I think comes out of this often, and you see this in multiple different places. You've seen it, in a much more tragic situation in Orlando with the shooting in the nightclub, how that community came together, and how you see with the rainbow seats in the stadium and so on and so forth, how you can make positive from the negative. What's lemonades from lemons, right? You can do that sort of stuff. Yep. But and we did see that yesterday. The beds for away fans is a nice little thing, and it does sort of speak to how, generally speaking, most football fans, regardless of who they support, aren't the hooligans of past. They aren't the bad people that wish ill will upon their opponent's fans. They're all human at the end, and they all love the same game. And certainly when this stuff comes out, the sort of the seriousness of the game gets put in perspective very quickly, right?
No, and even then, Duane, we remember the bad times, but even during the bad times, it's not everybody that was a hooligan, right? So you have that aspect. But no, bed for away fans, tables for away fans last night in Dortmund. Monaco fans, Borussia Dortmund fans around the same tables, around the same dorm rooms, were able to find some place to stay, those who were stranded because of the postponement of the game. And so you have that positive aspect of gathering together. And I do feel like there will be now a link between those two clubs, at least the supporters. A friendship has begun yesterday. It's a tragedy how it begun, but sometimes friendship is valuable.
No, for sure. And I mean, you do see that in the world right now. The clubs that have had stadium tragedies generally have a bit of a bond that others don't, like you see that across the board. And I don't want to, get too bogged down in this, but certainly that does exist out there. And I think there is an affinity and sort of an appreciation that they've both gone through the same thing. And look, thank God this wasn't in the stadium, because we all know that stadium was pretty full by the time that this happened. And I don't think that you would have escaped without a loss of life at that particular point. But I think that does reflect how secure stadiums are too. If whoever these people were that were targeting this wanted to make an impact, and the stadium would have been a big impact, but they couldn't get in there. We saw that in France last year too, just before the Euro, where they attempted to attack in a stadium, and that didn't happen. Unfortunately, it happened elsewhere. But nonetheless, it's certainly something that does sort of make you reflect when you spend a lot of time in stadiums, like Kevin and I do, about the security that's there. And we do have to go through certain things that are inconvenient to us now to cure that, I guess. And I guess this is why that is. And that's just frustrating on some human level, because why should we have to, why should anyone have to be inconvenienced because of one malcontent or 20 malcontents or whatever? But I guess that's the world we live in, right?
Yeah. So please, now, when you look at your plastic tote bag before you go into your MLS game, be thankful.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, this is reality. But the other, look, I don't like to lecture on this, because I do understand that there is typically where these things come from. We understand that, but we don't know. And until we know, I don't think we should assume anything. And often, I think even when the people claiming responsibility for these things are claiming to be part of a certain group, a certain idea, they most certainly do not reflect anywhere close to the majority of the people that also share whatever identity that it is that they're sharing. I think I said that carefully enough, but nonetheless, that's what I want to say about that. These are idiots that are generally uneducated and angry at something, and this is how they're lashing out. And the way to fight them isn't to be angry at everyone. It's to try and be understanding of where the anger comes from, and to address it on some level in a way that isn't always easy, but you have to turn the other cheek, so to speak, to quote someone that I think I've heard of, and be better. That's just ultimately, you just have to be better.
Yeah.
And
let's go back on the football side here for a second. When this game, so there's no segue possible, so I'm just gonna steer the ship right back up the track and say, it's unfortunate, but is the postponement not even too early? Should have been postponed like a week. Should have been. I know it's difficult because you have the rest of the calendar and a lot of things that are already planned, but it seems like a quick turnaround. Even just playing the next day early, it's. We mentioned there's a player injured. There's the aspect of the shock value, the mental preparation, everything is thrown off. Is the not even 24-hour postponement too little?
I don't think it's entirely fair, particularly for Dortmund. I can't imagine, having gone through what they've gone through, that they're going to be mentally prepared to play this game. Will that mean that they're at a competitive disadvantage? And again, having said this, we understand that this is frivolous in a way, but nonetheless, that's as Kevin said, segue to it. Certainly, I do think that there might be a slight advantage to Monaco, although they were affected as well, and they would have to be shaken up a bit too, you would think. They've spent a night in the road and things and so on and so forth, so maybe that equals out. But you're right, though. Like, I don't know what the answer is, because the fixture, other than to maybe move the weekend fixtures in two different leagues and the travel and to make people stay logistically, it's a nightmare, right?
And the return leg, too. You have the return leg schedule, so you can't really postpone the first leg. If it would have happened, example, hypothetically, for the second leg, there's maybe ways around it where you could have postponed a few days and stuff. But because it's a first leg and it throws the rest of the calendar away, you kind of have to do what they did. And it's unfortunate. It's not fair at all for both sides, but maybe even more unfair for Dortmund. That not even that less than 24 hours turnaround is still. But again, what's there to say, right? When you fall off your bike, the best thing you could do is quickly go back on it and ride like nothing happened. I think there's a little bit of that needed too. I think that game will be a healing process from yesterday's event in a smaller scale, but in a scale whatsoever.
Yeah, look, a couple thoughts on that. Look, the only solution that I can think of isn't much of a solution. It would be for both of those teams to come together along with UEFA and agree to make it a single game match, and then just delay it for the second leg and just make that all or nothing. But that's a very difficult decision for Dortmund to make, because they'd be giving up the home game, right? Like, that would be a solution that might have worked, but nonetheless, they've decided to go ahead. And as you said, get back on your bike, get back on the horse, whatever analogy you want to put here. For that, there's an element to that for the players, because what they do best is all athletes are like this. They're actors, not thinkers, right? Like they want to physically express themselves, and this gives them an opportunity to do this. But it also gives an opportunity for the community of Dortmund, the community of BVB fans, the community of Monaco fans, to speak out against what happened, to have displays, to have. I don't know if they have time to make a display, but nonetheless, I'm sure that Dortmund fans are pretty creative and pretty good at what they do. So hopefully they have an opportunity, or had an opportunity in the quick turnover between this, to maybe be able to make some kind of statement through their actions in that stadium to say, we don't stand for this. And I think that that's also important. And there's an element of the game must go on, and that's show the world that we're not going to be scared about this, and we're not going to let terror win. We're not going to let fear win. There's an element of that too, which I think is important. And it does have a symbolic and sort of just an emotional reaction. If you're not a sports fan, you may not completely get it. You may say, why do you just cancel the game? But if you are a sports fan, you kind of do get it, because that's part of how you express yourself, right? Is through sport. And this is an opportunity for these fans to express themselves through that sport. But again, just to finish this, I want to go back to the beds for away fans and the food for away fans and all that sort of stuff. That is, I think, the message that we need to take away from this, is how quickly that happened, how fast people realized that this is where we need to go with this. This is how we deal with this. We're going to use social media almost immediately to try and make sure that no one's left behind, that no one is wandering in the streets of Dortmund last night, potentially when they might have thought it was dangerous too, to keep people safe. And it just shows that, as much as there's bad in the world, there's a hell of a lot more good. And I think that's the message that we're all going to take away from this. And I think we're all going to turn this on at 12:30 today, 12:30 Eastern time, and and see what this looks like, because it could end up being a very good story in the end. I guess good's a strong way to put it, but it could end up having a positive aspect to it in the end, Kevin.
Yep, let's hope so.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll get back onto the pitch completely. We'll break down a little bit of that Uwe upset.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Duane, we didn't have a chance to open and banter, so Duane, Leafs Capitals, eh?
It's my nightmare. Okay, for those that don't understand, I think most people do get this, but I grew up as a Washington Capitals fan, because I didn't actually grow up in Toronto. I grew up near Belleville, which is sort of a community that is, I wouldn't say halfway between Montreal and Toronto, but it's a good portion away from Toronto.
Yeah.
Sorry, say that again?
It's kind of halfway. Like, we consider it halfway. Technically, it's Rockville, but Belleville is really halfway when you're driving.
Yeah, well, you've got that Denny's there, so you could always stop for breakfast at the Denny's. We usually do on the way to Montreal. But it kind of has the option. And when I grew up around, half of my friends, or let's just say half, 40% of my fans were Leafs fans, 40% of my friends were Habs fans, and 20% were others. And of those others, there was really only one Washington Capitals fan, and that was me, because I've always been a little different. And nonetheless, that's how I grew up. Now, I live in Toronto now, and I'm a pretty proud Torontonian, as everyone who listens to me knows. So I do, in fact, I cheer for, I root for the Leafs a little bit, but they're still clearly my second team. So this is something that doesn't make me entirely comfortable, but you can't change who you are.
Exactly.
You can't change the team that you cheer for your whole life.
Yeah, exactly. You can't just change for one player.
And also
you, Austin Matthews.
Yeah. And look, and I said this on Facebook with my friends, they were taking that out of me, and I said, look, the Leafs are going to have their day, and maybe you don't want to say that as a Montrealer, so I'll say it. The Leafs look like they're going to have their day, at least to be very competitive for a while. The Caps, this has to be their day.
The window's about
this team is set up.
Yeah, the window's about to shut down.
Yeah, exactly. They could potentially win the Stanley Cup, which would be remarkable for someone who's watched them their whole life this year. But they also could potentially be like a non-playoff team in a year. So
speaking of,
we're gonna watch it. We're gonna hope.
Exactly. Speaking of non-playoff team, and we'll get back to soccer. Yesterday, we saw something happen for the second time in a row for Barcelona in the Champions League, Duane, where in the first leg of the quarterfinal this time, and it happened for them in the round prior, they got beat on the road, this time 3-0. But even though it wasn't 4-0, the way Uwe looked compared to PSG, those goals were not fluke. Those goals were great skills, were worked with the tactics of a Juve with Dybala. I was impressed by Juve, and Juve has been on a run at home lately. Since 2015, they're unbeaten. It has been a great run for Juve, even though they're missing the boat with their new logo next year. They are still having the old logo, and what a way to finish maybe their history with the old logo than beating off Barcelona home and away.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I tweeted out yesterday, PSG isn't as good as Juve. This is not going to get turned around at this point. And anyone who watches this, because I just don't think Barcelona can defend Juve for an entire 90 minutes at the new camp. I just don't think they can, based on what I saw. And it's ultimately, it always comes down to that. They are such a top-heavy team right now, Barca, that they've completely let go, combined with the fact that some of their midfield genius is either retired or getting older. Yes, they're older. The others aren't there anymore.
Yeah.
Their back line is retired or getting older. They are just a team that really has not replaced their core components in the same way that they would have. They've gone splashy. Their top end, like I say, that three-headed monster at the top end is pretty damned impressive. But three players in the attacking end don't make a team anymore, and especially in a modern era of tactics where you have geniuses that spend basically 24/7 trying to figure out how to break, how to defeat teams like Barcelona, and have figured it out. Like, this is nowhere near the team that it once was. And even a guy like Messi, when Messi loses a step, that's not really saying much. He's still miles
still
above most,
than
but
everybody else.
nonetheless.
Yeah, I think he's missing a step mentally, though. I don't think it's physically. I think he is in his prime physical career right now, but mentally, he seems to be tired. He seems to, I don't know if you can say the pressure is getting to him, but the international pressure mixed with Barcelona pressure now, and the fact that it's not as easy as it used to be in the Liga, now it's like Madrid is laughing now. They're happy with the latest result. Barcelona was not in a great form in the league. They lost last week to Malaga, I think. So it's not an easy time for Barcelona. And you mentioned the defense. It's not just the defense. It's, everything used to go in for Barcelona. Are you understand what I'm saying? Everything used to go off the post and go in. That little extra bounce that the ball needed to complete the rotation of the ball to make the ball go in to the net instead of outside the post. Sometimes it's a game of millimeters, and it used to always go Barcelona's way by design, maybe. But when you're talking about so small margins of error there, once you fail that margin of error, it happened like yesterday. How many shots? I think 5 times the ball went like a foot off the post, or so close, Iniesta on Buffon, or Buffon puts a hand on it. Those little margin of errors will catch up to you when it's what makes a big difference. When you're executing it, it looks amazing. When you start to miss the cues and miss those extra millimeters of space to score the goal instead of hitting the bar, makes a big difference.
Yeah, look, couple things here. Tactically speaking, teams have figured out how to defend the type of possession game that Barca plays, and it's not like they still don't have massive amounts of possession in these games. 66-34 was the stats in terms of in favor of Barcelona for the possession against Juve yesterday. Although when you watch that game, he didn't get the vibe that Barca was dominated, even though they had 2/3 of the ball, and that's, I think, a tactical evolution that we're seeing across the board. Leicester, to a certain extent, figured out how to do it in the in the Premier League last year, right? So where they would give up like 70% possession in some games and still look like they were the better team. And that, I think, is just an evolution of the tactics. They know how to defend these teams now. Especially Italians, have figured out how to defend these, and Italians have always known how to defend. So there you go. And Juve is the most Italian of all. The other thing about this too is that they remind me a bit, Barcelona right now, of Manchester United of about 3 years ago, when they were going through that evolution from Alex Ferguson to their current state right now, where there was a certain something that was lost. That there was a certain, I don't know even how to say it, like there was an aura that was lost from the team at some level, and it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it was with Barca. It's easier with United because it's when Ferguson left, but when that aura popped, teams didn't play them as frightened as they used to. And I think PSG played them frightened, and that's at the end of that second leg. And they also, if you look at that second leg, as much as it was a beautiful miracle in a lot of ways, they also got a penalty handed to them that wasn't a penalty, and there was a little bit of luck involved there.
Exactly.
So let's be honest here. So with that aura gone, again, it's just teams aren't playing them frightened. And when you don't play them frightened, you can play your game, you can sit back there, you can defend like Juve did, you can get out in the break like Juve did, and you can beat these teams, and they've shown that they're beatable now. They've shown that they're very vulnerable. With 4 goals allowed in the first leg against PSG, 3 goals allowed on the first leg against Juve. Imagine a scenario where this happens a second time, but could you imagine a scenario when it happens like 3 more times? Because that's kind of what we're looking at right now. I'm not going to proclaim Barca dead, because Barca has a lot of wealth and resources, and they have, a player, whatever mental issues he might be having, which is still, in my mind, the best pure finisher in the history of the game. So you have that. So there's opportunity there for this to be turned around very quickly. But right now, Barca is, if not dead, they're in intensive care right now. That's what I'll say. They're going to need something major, a major change in that team. And, there's going to be a management change coming up. That's already been announced. Yeah. You would think that there will be some major transfers coming in. Well, they have some stuff to deal with as well, but
they have to.
There'll be some change.
The roster needs to evolve, Dwayne. I think it's as easy as that. You can't stay the same forever. I think there's a reluctance to, I don't want to say the post-Messi era, because I don't think it's the right way to put it, but I think it needs to go back to when Messi came up and when Messi became successful. The team wasn't built on Messi. Messi was a cog in the machine, right? And now that cog is really heavy on top, and he needs to go back to being a machine, a well-oiled machine. And I think you mentioned the trend. It's not the transition aspect, but the midfield is getting a little older, so that speed aspect is not as present as it used to be. We do see some players, some young players coming in and out of the lineup, but you need more of that. You remember, you used to put a Barca shirt on anybody basically, and they used to become one of the best in the world. You need kind of that feeling back, and I don't know if it's through an evolution of tactics, a move away from this, what made you who you are, and go back to the roots of before tiki-taka. I don't know. It's a tough question. It takes a long time to come up with an answer, but seems like there's need to be something to rekindle that fire, to maybe restart that passion, that identity that seems to be quite lost. And maybe that's what we're talking about when we mentioned aura earlier. That identity of play maybe used to be the aura, and now it seems like it's confused between what it is and what it should be, and what's the transition going to be.
Yeah, you mentioned Messi as being part of the cog. Look, yeah, well, I carefully said that before. I didn't say he was the greatest player of all time. I said he's the greatest finisher of all time, and I do believe that. I think that he has an ability to put the ball in the back of the net in a way that very few, if any, have ever had. But the glory of Barca back in the day was driven by Iniesta and Xavi. Xavi's in Qatar now and 37 years old, and Iniesta is talking about going to MLS. That's where Barca is right now, and they aren't where they were 5-6 years ago, when they truly were one of the most brilliant club teams that have ever played this game, and were a joy to watch. Now they're not a joy to watch anymore. In fact, I called them heels yesterday. I made a wrestling reference. You weren't proud of me, Kevin.
Well, it's not even a wrestling reference anymore, though. The heel, it's like now it's a true, like even Matt Doyle, the armchair analyst, did that. Said that Jermaine Jones did a heel turn last week against Montreal. So I think it's a well-known term now, heel.
Well, and I also, but I tweeted it. I said they entered their Hollywood Hulk Hogan years, is what I said. So that's more of a wrestling reference right there. So anyway,
let me tell you, Mean Gene.
Well, again, they went from being the most popular thing in the world to one of the less popular things in the world. I bet that's overexposure too.
Yeah,
like some of Barca's heel turn is overexposure, but nonetheless, look, you're not going to replace Xavi very easily. One of the most brilliant midfielders that ever played the game, right? Age takes them all out in the end. Iniesta the same way. You're not going to replace him very easily. In fact, I would say Iniesta is their best player. I would put him a notch above Barca, or above Messi during those glory days. But regardless, they were a three-headed monster there, and the three-headed monster now of Neymar and Suarez with Messi isn't quite as imposing, because both Neymar and Suarez have holes in their game, mental holes in their game. They are heels. There's no doubt about that. And that does make a change. And the other thing too, like, look, the death of Barca, I hate to go tiki-taka is dead, because it's ridiculous. No tactic dies. But tiki-taka has been figured out to a certain extent. And I will even extend that to Pep at Manchester City and the struggles they've had this year too, where he's tried to put that kind of tactics and formations into City's DNA to limited success this year, and has had to maybe adjust his game a little bit. Bringing Torre back into the mix in the middle of the year and sort of bringing him back on board is a reflection that I think Pep's beginning to understand, that you can't just take that blueprint that he used in Barcelona and transfer it into the Premier League or anywhere in the world right now. I think you have to play a little bit more muscular, a little bit more, a little more direct. I think the tactics of football evolve. They go ebb and they flow, and they ebb and they flow.
Not just that. What's a tactics in definition? It's the way to handle your roster against another roster in the way to get the most out of yours, even though yours might not be as good as the other ones, and impose your will on the other one, right? Technically, that's what tactics is in layman's terms. So you cannot use the same ones just because you don't have the same 18, 23 players everywhere. You have to adjust your mentality to the players, to the tools, the options that you have. Otherwise, it's just trying to make the classic square peg into the round hole. Like if you force hard enough, it'll go in, but it'll break something in the meantime.
Yeah, precisely. And with the minute left in this segment, I feel that we're maybe giving Juve a short stick, considering they did have a brilliant performance.
Dybala,
across the board.
Backing your own words, saying that, yeah, I like Messi, but I don't want to be the next Messi. I want to be Dybala. I think my game's good too. Backing his own words.
Yeah, that was truly, calling it his breakout game might be a bit much. Said calling it a breakout game for him might be a bit much, but it certainly was, a game that's going to be remembered. And I think in the history of his career, you might be talking about this one for a while. Juve, I called them this, and when we were previewing the quarterfinals, they might be the dark horse of these 8 because they've had a brilliant run, and no one's talking about them as potential champions. But as we saw yesterday, this is a club that absolutely has an opportunity to go to the top of the mountain again, Kevin.
Yes.
All right, let's take a quick break.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
Welcome back. We're going to do a bit of a D2 Wednesday here. I know that we had a lot of, with the Champions League going on and the issues in Dortmund, we kind of gave it a bit of a short stick today. But I'm going to start, Kevin. Did you see that goal, that insane goal from the Oklahoma game?
You mean the flip-in, throw-in, then the bicycle kick for a goal from Energy? Yeah, I've seen that. And I think everybody in the world of soccer have seen it right now. It's amazing. Legality of it, I don't know. I'm still like, if I was a ref, I don't know if I would accept those throw-ins. I know they're kind of legal, but impressive skills.
Yeah, I've never quite liked the flip throw. You ever seen that video? It's a famous video now where the kid did the flip throw and threw it straight into the kid's face. You ever seen that one?
Yes, I have.
That's amazing if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, exactly. So no, I'm not a fan of the flip throw. I am a fan of a bicycle kick. Everyone likes a good overhead volley every so often, right? And that was one hell of a good one there too. And I don't know whether that's bad defending or whether that's good attacking. Who's to say? But nonetheless, it was something that's going to make the rounds relative.
The guy flips it in the box, it tips over, and he bicycle kicks it in. Like, what do you want to do? Like, it's you just have to marvel and look at it. Be like, all right, good job. Come on, let's get the goal back.
Well, exactly. To be serious, I guess, for a second about this, there in Soccernomics, the book that came out a few years ago, he demonstrated that there is a greater possibility of a goal scored off of a long throw-in than off of a corner kick. But yet, managers still, for some reason, and I don't quite know why this is, still refuse to do long throw-ins because, I don't know, maybe they think it's like beneath them or something. Like it seems too simple, it seems too direct. It always blew my mind. If I had the ability to put a long throw into the box, I would do it every damn time because again, it's more difficult to defend. You can understand, you've defended corners your whole career, right? As a defender, you know how the sort of the arc of the ball, it's an in swing, it's an out swing, whatever. You kind of have zonal marking, you can figure out the post, blah 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 blah. Like once every 11 times the goal goes in, you deal with that. But by and large, if you look at the statistical success rate of corner kick, they're not very good.
Yeah,
there's an argument to be made that a short corner is better than into the box. I know that people scream, but statistically speaking, it suggests that. But the long throw can be very difficult because I just don't think it comes in flat. People aren't too sure what kind of trajectory it's going there. And if you attack that correctly, I think you can do a great job with it. And I think you can also direct it a little better on the throw.
Yeah, more control. It's what your hands, for God's sakes. You have more control over it. You can put the spin that you want on it or whatever. But you remember Stoke a few years ago? They used to do this all the time. And in a league like MLS, where you're playing at Yankee Stadium once a year, if not many times, if you're in the same division, and it's that time that year where you play twice there, you use that short pitch to basically from midfield. You can throw it in. You can make it into the box if you have that type of skill set in your roster. And the player that he did this with the energy, his name escapes me right now, but that's a skill that you practice on your own, right? Last week, Duane, I was talking with a guest we had with Simon, and we were talking about development and how players in North America need to spend more time by themselves with the ball in their own free time to become better at it. And that's the type of skill you can develop. Long corners, long throw-ins. I mean, practice your throws whenever just go to your backyard and practice to throw long. You don't need to be flashy and make that flip. If you can, go for it. If it's truly getting you more power and more distance, but it's a skill that you can practice, and it doesn't have to be the flip. We've seen players throw-ins and having a very deep throw. It is possible, and it's a skill you have to own.
Free play is the key to any sport development in my mind. Obviously, you have great long-term player development theories that are out there, and you need that sort of didactic, for lack of a better way, training. But I think that you also need free play. I talk about this all the time. We 5 rings. What's hockey players in Canada? They get as much development out of playing road hockey as they do out of playing
road hockey
on the ice for practice sessions. In my mind,
you mean living room hockey or backyard rink like a Wayne Gretzky, or in your garage with the old dryer a la Sidney Crosby, or with soccer in the street of your favela like Ronaldo and Ronaldinho, always with the ball at your feet, with no shoes from the time you're 0 to 7th, and develop crazy skills with your feet that you wouldn't have any other way. Yeah, it's that type of dedication that makes the big difference. And those throw-ins, if you develop that skill, it can actually help you get jobs in the future, especially at a D2 level in North America, but anywhere else as well. If you have that type of skill set, so equal to equal talent-wise on the run of play, you're not going to get picked. But if you have that skill set, it might be the deal maker that gets you a job and gets you a foot in and gets you an opportunity. So I think those type of skills need to be used more, and especially in the D2 level. So I was kind of glad to see it in the USL.
Yeah, or if you want to go something a little prettier, you can learn how to curl that ball over a wall. That's going to get you some jobs for sure. So nonetheless, yeah, you're absolutely right on that. And but regardless, to go back to that, it was a pretty loose little piece of play, which shows that you never know what you're going to see when you go to watch a lower level game in this part of the world. And we encourage you to go out there and do that. I did want to mention it's D2 Wednesdays, but this is more like, I don't know, D4 basically. But Dallas's academy. They did upset Real Madrid's under 17 team in the Generation Adidas Cup this year, 1-0. The Real Madrid kids, they were mostly at the upper edge of the age bracket, so there was a lot of 17-year-olds on the pitch, because when you're having an under 17 team, generally speaking, they're mostly 17, and Dallas were mostly 16. So there you go.
But not just that, when we all know Madrid too, right? Where their academy is basically everybody else's academy, and they just buy them when they're older than 17. So that explains it's not the same as well. But no, I'm just making fun of it. But no, you're right. It's kind of an accomplishment, and it's to not make a bad pun, it's a trophy, basically. You're like, look, we beat Real Madrid's academy. We're making something good here.
Yeah, well, look, I was listening to the interview with Bill Manning that I talked about last week, and one of the things that he was like very proud of was the fact that the TFC Academy kids, the TFC 3, they drew Juventus, and that was a scalp for them too. They a draw, so it does, I think, reflect the fact that and the way he put it, Manning did in this game. And I'm only going back to the TFC example because I have a direct quote I can give as opposed to the Dallas one, which I don't. He said, Juventus played down, we played up, but we got the draw, and it's something that our kids are going to use to build upon, and it's a scalp. It's something for us to use and to say, look, we did this. If we did this, then we can do it against other teams. Look, yes, this under 17s of Real Madrid are probably not reflective of the top under 17 players that they have available to them, simply because they, generally speaking, will just sweep out and buy the best ones, as you just said, and they would be on their under 19 team, which is the bigger development program in most of the major programs in programs. I'm talking about college teams here. Most major clubs in Europe, their under-19 team is the important one. But nonetheless, you're still playing those iconic white strips. You're still, has Real Madrid on the scoreboard. That's something that those kids can hold on to for the rest of their life. And most of them aren't going to play pro. You know That's what? True. Like even at a high academy, most kids don't go in for a high pro level. So it's something that they will take for a long time.
No, exactly. So that is interesting. And Division 2 is rolling on. We've seen some interesting things in the audience, or what's it called? The at the gates, the amount of attendance. There we go. Attendance in USL has been interesting. That's what I was trying to say. I couldn't get my word right. The attendance in USL has been quite interesting, and unfortunately for the NASL, has been quite difficult this year, and it was kind of expected. But USL have been, I believe, surprised. Yes, when you have, like we were going to talk about it all year long, those 12s team in quote unquote audition now, it's getting more difficult. And when you have teams like St. Louis, where you had a big hype, and then you had a great build, we're going to get the MLS, we're going to get a new stadium, then the council vote, and then you lose it, and you realize that, it's going to be difficult. It was going to be difficult for St. Louis to get the same amount of attendance as years prior. So I will keep a close eye on that this season. But I have to say, I've been quite impressed by the play of a few different teams, especially Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has been dominating so far, and it's kind of makes sense. A team with infrastructures that were really high, even for the NASL, and now in using those infrastructures and that knowledge of North American Division 2/3 roster, players, connections, you see it really come to fruition. And the Deltas as well, Duane. The Deltas are doing pretty good, which the Deltas were built in the same way in the NASL this time, but those two teams have impressed me so far.
Yeah, for sure. Look, it's been a lot. There's been a lot of good soccer within USL. I've watched quite a bit of it actually so far, and it's quite enjoyable. It's really easy to access too, and that's something that I think that's important for the growth of this. The one team that's worried me a little bit, if you want to go to the other side of it, other than TFC2, which is always worrisome to me in terms of how they're structuring it, and to go back to the Generation Adidas Cup, this TFC3 in this case, they did have their ass handed to them by the New York Red Bulls, who are the defending USL champions. And I look at what they're doing both at that level and at the level above, and I go, maybe TFC has to take a little bit of a closer look at their academy. And I wrote an article for the Vocal Minority on that last year in terms of what's going on. There's some successes there, but maybe it's not quite as good as they want. But putting them aside, the Fury are also worrisome to me a little bit because of the drop down. They went from 2 years ago to where they are now, and you see them trying to pump up the home opener against TFC2, and it's a little difficult to get, well, they were making fun of the 2 part of that, but I don't know whether they want to do that too much because they're in the same league, right?
Yeah,
so that's something to watch out for.
Not just that, you remember the momentum and the enthusiasm when they made the NASL Cup final 2 years ago, and the attendance were really good for like around 4,000 or 5,000, right? At the new stadium, and it was doing pretty good. It seems that momentum has been lost, and it's not just a move to USL. It started the postseason prior when they gutted the team. The Marc Dos Santos left, they gutted the team and cut down on expenses, and then it follows up to the same continuity right now, and it truly can be felt in the supporters culture. It truly can be felt in the stands at an Ottawa Fury game now.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I did enjoy going to those, and there was something going on that was pretty good there. The next 3 home games for the Fury are TFC2, which I would have to say is pretty close to a must-win for them based on TFC2's form and the fact that 2 is there. If the Ottawa Fury lose to a MLS reserve team this early in their home opener, I think that's going to be a very difficult symbolic thing for them to overcome in terms of drawing or generating more attention. They follow that up with 2 games that are going to be very tough for them as well. The Rowdies are the next USL game in. That's May 6th. And then on the Wednesday, May 3rd, they play the first game of the quarterfinals of the Voyageurs Cup, which we'll have obviously a preview on that. That's coming into May 3rd against FC Edmonton. So those are going to be 2 tough games plus a game that has a lot of pressure behind it for the Fury to start their home schedule this year. And hopefully for them, they can get a little bit of momentum there, and that they can find out that there's the fans can learn and find out there are some really worthwhile things at the USL level, because I reject the idea that the top teams in USL aren't equal to the teams in NASL, but I think that some of their fans do reject that idea.
Yeah, especially this year, Duane. When you're looking at the actual roster of NASL, the actual roster of the Rockies or something. Yeah, no, absolutely right. All right, Duane. So I think that's going to wrap it up for today. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute, and you can follow myself at Kev Laramee. Give a follow to the show right here that you're listening to on social media as well at Soccer Today SPN. If you have missed yesterday's show, I suggest you give it a listen. A great roundtable with Tom Marshall of ESPN FC covering the Mexican Soccer Federation and Mexican soccer in general. Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer, Duane Rollins, and yours truly. We had a roundtable talking about the World Cup bid of 2026 at CONCACAF, and those three countries want to put forward that are going to work with a lot of details, a lot of information, a lot of hypothesis, and a lot of questioning in that show. So I suggest you give it a listen, and maybe tomorrow night, but more importantly, next week. We're taking a little holiday break, but until next time, as always, have a great Champions League and have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.